when you're starting out, it's so difficult to get these sponsors, but you will get them.
Those big companies are looking to put their money somewhere to help the local community.
There is no financial ROI to really sponsoring an F1 in schools team.
Actually starting an F1 in schools is a very expensive thing.
There's so many things in this competition you just don't learn in school. Hello and welcome to Off the Track. My name is Peter, and in this episode we're going to be talking a little bit about community outreach and sponsorships. And this is an area which has changed considerably over the past 2 years due to the pandemic. And with me today to help explore this is Matthew.
Hello.
And we've got members from the UK team Eclipse. So we have Javier.
Hello.
Evie.
Hi.
And Tom.
Hello.
So do you guys just want to give us a little bit of a background about who you are?
Yeah, of course. So our team name is Eclipse. I'm team principal. Tom is an engineering manager, and Evie is enterprise manager. We're missing 2 members today, but we've got here 3 of us here to represent us for this podcast. So in the competition so far, we've had a bit of success. We started competing at the very end of 2019, and our first competition was just at the beginning of 2020, where we became North London regional champions, and then this led on to becoming 3rd place national finalists in 2020, and then ironically enough, in 2021, this again repeated, with the only difference being that at the national finals, we were crowned English champions and won the Best Verbal Presentation Award. Outside of the competition, we've done a lot of work in our community. So, for example, we run our primary STEM project, we run a number of outreach events, created a very specific return on investment scheme for our partners, and genuinely just had an interest in making a difference in our local community.
Excellent. So let's get back to basics. And what is community outreach and sponsorship? How would you kind of explain that?
So in essence, community outreach is how your team interacts with your community. We've run a few projects here and there, like the primary STEM project. You could run a recycling project, or just genuinely getting yourself involved with the community. And sponsorship is the money, the advice, and the manufacturing aid that you get from partners that you've worked with. We've had partners in the community, we've had partners across the whole of the country, and we've spoken to people across the world, and they're just people that will properly help your project to the best of your ability.
Cool. And why is it important that we do community outreach and sponsorship? Apart from it being on the scorecards, why do we need to do it?
Yeah, although there aren't really kind of specific points on the scorecards, it really makes yourself look good for the judges if they've seen that you've made an effort to reach out into your community to make a difference in your community. It's worth doing not only to promote yourself as a team and promoting your sponsors, but it also promotes F1 in schools, and I think they really like that. It's also good to talk about in your verbal presentation and your enterprise portfolio, as 2 big things in these are collaborations and marketing. So you help pick up points in these sections. In terms of sponsorship, there are points awarded in the 2022 World Finals in the form of having a sponsor/partner hierarchy. So for us personally, that's our return on investment scheme. So we set out different we set out different what's the word? We've got different levels of our hierarchy. There we go. That's the word. So we give back to our platinum sponsor more than we do to our bronze sponsor, for example. So all of our sponsors are really getting out of it what they put in. So not only does this help us for the judges, but posting it on social media also makes you look more friendly to the other teams, and just makes you look a bit more appealing to everyone else.
Awesome. So obviously the past 2 years have been pretty different to how it used to be before the pandemic. So how has your sort of community and outreach kind of been tailored towards the pandemic? Obviously, during lockdowns, you can't really go and visit your sponsors in person, do community events in person. So can you give us some examples of how you kind of navigated that during the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. I think lockdown has been a challenge for every single team, and as soon as lockdown started, just did weekly Zoom calls, and from this we then started calling other teams from across the world. We were invited to join calls with Brazilian Six and Aquila Racing in India, and it just kind of developed over time. We used the time in lockdown to focus on our social media a lot, because the marketing element of it wasn't important in terms of the rules, but we thought it would be a really good way to like promote ourselves as a team in the time when we couldn't go to physical events. And then as lockdown kind of slowed down, we were able to go out more. We went to some events with BAE Systems, so there was a gaming festival nearby, and we went to that with BAE Systems, and we were able to start the primary STEM project. It had been in the pipeline, and we used the time in lockdown to like organise ourselves, get together what we really needed, had the calls with the sponsors, and then as soon as it was over, we were able to properly get into our community. So I think lockdown especially, we just used the time to learn about each other and to like plan things. This is where Javier properly like made proper organisational documents. We sorted our Google Drive out, and just everything became a lot smoother. And so when we came out of lockdown, we were able to just get straight involved with everything we could.
So it sounds like you used lockdown.
Yeah, so...
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. Just go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, it seems like you've really used lockdown, really efficiently to kind of make sure that when lockdown ended, you could hit the ground running. So, yeah, and make the most of the time out of lockdown.
I think that lockdowns could actually be a great opportunity for this, because you've just got so much more free time. You can just focus on organisation, and there's not much to distract you.
No.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think during lockdown, to be honest, it's where we were most productive. Personally, myself, I was in the year where all my exams got cancelled. So those, I think it was like 4 or 5 months straight of just not having any responsibility to do school. It was just F1 in schools. And I think without that time, I'm not sure we would have had that, that much progress in such a short space of time. But fortunately enough, just before the pandemic began, we were able to secure a deal with our now platinum sponsor, BAE Systems. So over the break, whilst we were really starting out as a team developing, we were able to form a partnership with them. So we developed our portfolios, our verbal presentations, and all other project elements over this time with their advice. And this also included kind manufacture. Obviously, we weren't able to go into school. So actually making our parts and assembling everything was, it was probably our biggest challenge above everything else. But just, I think the point with that is that having a sponsor that can cover all of the bases of, finance, advice, and your manufacture is really, really ideal. Obviously, we understand not every team can have that, and we are really fortunate to have them on our side. They're an amazing company, and they've supported us obviously throughout the pandemic, and every for example, our primary STEM project where we've needed that funding, they've always been more than happy to help us out. But yeah, that obviously, again, making the point, it's not hard. It's hard to get someone like that, but there are a few points to look at where you can do something, which I think Tom is very happy to speak about.
Yeah, so kind of one of the things that we did was look to have a unique selling point, which helped bring in more sponsors and make us more appealing to sponsors. Ours came from our ethos, which is innovative engineering for the future. We want to get as many people involved in STEM as possible through showing them like the fun things you can get up to, really. So we started off with little projects we ran in school. So we had a technology club where the year 7 students all made their own little cars and raced them. So they did a kind of mini competition. But then we kind of built this up over time, and we've now got our primary STEM project, which is a whole day where a primary school comes into us in our secondary school, and we run them a whole day of designing cars, building cars, and then we eventually race them down the track at the end of the day, and we get a winner from that. So it's kind of making a competition out of it, making it more appealing to these younger students so that they can get involved with it a bit more. With our sponsors as well, we have quite a lot of sponsors. It's more useful having sponsors from lots of different areas so that we can kind of get as much in as possible. So having areas from different industries gives us all these different industry expertise that we can then put together for our competition.
I think going back to our platinum sponsor, is I know it takes quite a lot of time to just understand your sponsors, and I know that our sponsor BAE Systems, they really like community involvement as well, and so lots of our financial aid from them has come in so we can give it back to the community. So as they're happy to sponsor us as long as we give it back to the community, because it's really important for them. And I think this is the same with lots of big sponsors. It's really hard to get them to start off with. You have to properly promote yourself to them and say why you're going, their money coming into you will benefit them. And I think lots of the time this is giving back to the community. It's so important to give back to the community, not just for yourself and your own feel good factor, but it's a big point for lots of sponsors.
And just jumping in there real quick, in terms of giving back to the sponsors or a return on investment, I feel like a mistake a lot of teams make is they try to do the give back. Their return on investment is things like logo on the car or logo on the pit display, those kinds of things, and that's not really what those businesses want. There is no financial ROI to really sponsoring an F1 in schools team. What they want is they want to see more community things happening, like what you said with your primary STEM challenge and things like that.
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, it's just, I think it's also part of that social responsibility companies have as well, just to kind of, especially for those kind of companies that are kind of STEM aligned. And I can see why BAE Systems would want to sponsor you, because it's, they are an aerospace company, they're an engineering company. So it has a benefit to them, because in the future, they might be supporting people who might work for them in the future. And then another very good point I think you mentioned is that trying to find a sponsor for each kind of area, which I don't think a lot of teams do. Did you manage to find a sponsor for every area, or is it just for a few?
I think we don't have financial sponsors from every area, but we've able to reach out to different people. So we've reached out to someone called Marcus Orlovsky, who is an ex-TEDx teacher and public speaker, and he really helped us with our presentation skills. So things like that, although someone may not class it as sponsorship, we found it still really helpful advice getting those people in, to help us out in that sort of area.
I think it's just building up your network as much as you can, because these are people that we've met at events and things, and it's just holding on to them, making sure you carry on emailing them. So we do a termly, so school term, newsletter that we send back to our sponsors, just updating them. And I think just refreshing them on what you're doing keeps them active with you as a team, having regular meetings with them, just to stay connected with them. Building up your network is so valuable in getting sponsors. And I think lots of new teams, they've got quite a shallow network. So I think just building your network up as much as possible will lead to so many opportunities.
Yeah, I have to agree with Evie there. And I think just to quickly go back to Matthew's point about, having a logo on a car. I think being active is really what they want to see. I think just to clarify that point, that what they want to see is that you're doing something, which is why lockdown was so hard, actively and physically to promote that brand that's sponsoring you positively. So, if you're putting your logo on the car, maybe 1,000 people see that, or maybe, a few thousand people see that, but, that is not going to lead to them. That's not going to lead to them, increasing their sales or anything like that. It is definitely more that, does this team look like they're doing something positive for the community? Do we want to back this? And a lot of times, those big companies are looking to put their money somewhere to help the local community. Obviously, BA Systems, they were based down in Rochester, which is not too far away from us. So, they are directly impacting this community.
I think that's something that it's something a lot of teams don't realise, is that sponsoring someone like a proper a football team, for example, in the Premier League, that's not the same as sponsoring an F1 in schools team. Because as you said, Javier, they're not getting any sales out of sponsoring an F1 in schools team. So I think when you approach sponsors, you kind of have to keep that in mind. And be honest with them, I think is pretty important. That they're not going to get sales from it, but they're helping out the community. Is that kind of how you approach sponsors? Did you kind of go about it in that way?
Yeah, definitely. Sure. I think that's absolutely how we went forward. We were completely honest. I think the way you approach sponsors, I think, is very important. We've definitely been guilty of it before. Sometimes being a bit too pushy does put people off. We eventually worked out a kind of system that we found worked for us. Might not work for everyone, but that was through a letter, email, and phone process. So you start by sending the quote unquote old-fashioned method of sending a letter to them, to the business. If you don't get a reply within 2 weeks, let's say, then you follow up with an email. Maybe they're more likely to see that. And then again, hopefully that goes through, and then you can sort something out. But if not, the last thing is a bit of nagging. It's through a phone call, phoning them up and say, oh, we're doing this. This is what we want to form with you. And if they're not happy, I think you've just got to take it in the chin and move on. There's so many companies that will help you. Obviously, through lockdown, that wasn't as prominent, but now as things are starting to get open again, that's much more feasible. So I completely agree with Peter's point.
Yeah, and I was just going to ask, you mentioned lockdown there. Did you find that a lot of sponsors or businesses were difficult or a bit reluctant to sponsor you financially because of COVID, because they're trying to reduce costs where possible, so it wasn't really in their interest to kind of sponsor a team? Did you find that was the case?
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, Tom. No, you can take it away with this point.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we're still kind of getting the backlog of that now at the moment. We're reaching out to companies, and they're still a little bit reluctant to help us out. But hopefully, in the coming years, probably by the end of even this year, they'll be a lot more able to help out with things like F1 in schools.
And I think you just have to think outside the box a little bit, because in lockdown they were a little bit hesitant to give us financial advice, but because they, like us, had a lot more time, they could help us. So we regularly called BAE Systems, and they helped us go through our portfolios and know, maybe you should do this a little bit differently. Like, I think it is just definitely not thinking very black and white. We have to get a sponsor, they need to give us money, we can do our, just thinking how you can work with them differently, because that's something that we managed to do in lockdown quite efficiently.
I think that's a really good way to go about it. Even if they couldn't give you financial advice, being able to get other advice in other ways is pretty efficient. I was just going to ask, here in Australia, the federal government gives out grants to STEM teams. Is that something that the UK government does?
It's not something we've heard of. Maybe it was a thing at one point, but no, we've never. It's never been advertised to us or anything. So unless we've missed something, I'm going to say no.
Well, it's sort of there's no direct STEM grant as it is, but you can be creative with it. The government gives out a lot of grants.
Yeah, I think it's something called Innovating Australia or something.
Yeah, we had one from Oz Industry.
Yeah, something like that.
That was 10 grand from Oz Industry.
Yeah, which is, it's pretty substantial amounts of money. So yeah, I was just wondering if, maybe that's why Australian teams are so good. I don't know, but...
Yeah.
We're quite fortunate at our school. We've sorry, Javier. We've built a quite. Our head teacher is a tech teacher, so I know lots of schools in the UK. As I understand, in Australia, it's quite a bit like F1 in schools is built into schools quite a lot. Not all the schools in the area do it. It's just a very independent thing. But because our head teacher is a tech teacher, and we've managed to establish our tech department with our sponsorship and also money from the school, we've got quite a good space to work with. I think that's we're quite fortunate with that. But I think lots of other teams, they have to go to businesses for. So we've got a CNC router. I think lots of teams don't have that. So there's a definite resource pressure from lots of other teams that we're fortunate not to have at the moment.
Yeah, I think that is a really good point that Evie's just made. I think the starting costs is something that I had a light bulb moment there. I think we didn't mention that before, but actually starting an F1 in schools is a very expensive thing. We're very lucky to have the resources we need at school, but we know for a fact there's not every school in the United Kingdom has the resources or has the funds to do that. So in terms of the differences between Australia and the UK, I'd say, in an unbiased opinion, I don't think we get as much backing. I think, as Evie was saying, I think it's quite a lot more independent here. But if it's any motivation to smaller teams in the UK, I think when you're actually finding these sponsors, and the way you're approaching them, I think that does build up a large part of your enterprise portfolio, for example. I think, on top of everything else, getting those funds and then thinking, I've got to do all of these other things. In reality, a lot of getting sponsorship does actually bulk up that portfolio. That's my only that's the only thought I had bouncing off Evie.
Or even collaborating with other teams in the local area that may have resources that you need, like another school that might have the equipment that you need. I think that's a free way of getting the resources that people might not think about, because it's very, very easy to become friendly with another team. We've made lots of connections that has helped us a lot in the competition that I think other people could bounce off of.
Yeah, no, that sounds brilliant. Just rewinding a little bit with approaching sponsors, how did you decide which sponsors or which businesses to approach? Were you kind of like a kind of scattergun approach, just kind of firing out stuff to sponsors everywhere, contacting, all different kinds of businesses, or did you really target what kind of businesses you wanted to approach, and you kind of went right, we need an engineering sponsor, and we need, someone who's maybe good in finance, etc., etc. So what kind of approach did you use?
I think we looked at where we lacked. So at the start, when we were very beginning as a team, we looked at our skill sets and thought, right, this is something we're good at, but what are we really lacking and could get help on? So one of those things was literally a very simple thing: our bearings for our car. We didn't know where to get them from, and so obviously that was a very specific thing. We knew that Carter bearings had been with the school for a while, and we know other teams in the UK had used them. So we thought, let's test these bearings, see how good they are. Thankfully, they were just as we expected. But when it comes to things like our pit display, for example, again, I think you've just got to target as many people as you can. I think it does depend. With stuff like very specific components for a car, for example, like 3D printing. We use 3D Print UK, and they're an amazing company. But that's not an area where we looked into loads of companies. It was just something that was quite general. But then when it came to big companies, I do think that's when it starts becoming, as you said, Peter, just firing out emails from all cylinders and seeing who replies and just hoping someone will notice you.
So how did you approach sponsors? Was it kind of all digital based? Was it via email and text messages and phone calls and that sort of stuff? or were you able to approach them, in person? And did you use kind of a prospectus, or was it all just kind of like emails and written word?
Yeah, so I think to start off with, we mentioned we sent letters to start off with, then emails, then phone calls. But recently it's kind of been harder sending letters and like meeting up with people, so we've done a lot of email work. And just so we have a set letter that we attach to our emails, signed by all the team, and it kind of just details the competition, who we are, what we've done, what we aim to achieve, and then how they could help us. In that sense, and we also attach our sponsorship hierarchy, so it kind of shows them how much they want to sponsor us with and how much they'll get back in return. So I think these two documents are quite key to attach to your email, and then your email acts like a covering letter, and then the letter attached acts as like your CV, just to kind of make yourself as appealing to these sponsors as possible.
And did you find that you had to refine your process over time? Did you find that certain kind of approaches worked better than others?
Yeah, definitely. I think to start with, we weren't as successful, but now we kind of, after working with BAE and kind of seeing how they responded to us and stuff like that, it's helped us look into our process a bit more. And so with sponsors we've contacted recently, in regards to our uniform and stuff like that, we've shown them what we can do a bit more, and shown them how they can get out of it, and shown them kind of the things we've already achieved, which is a lot more helpful as we've been in the competition for the past 2 years. So maybe might not be as helpful for teams that are just starting out, but I think showing them something that you've done is quite important.
Another wish-washy kind of point. We in lockdown we spent a lot of time learning about each other, and one of the things that BAE Systems taught us is to use a personality profiling system. And Tom and Maisie they're yellow, they're very outgoing people, and so they're the people that usually pick up the phone. I know I am not the person to answer the phone from sponsors, but a lot of the time, so Maisie's in charge of the pit display and the uniform, so she's been contacting the sponsors the most about that. But yeah, I think that's what's worked best for us personally. I think learning about each other is really valuable for being able to contact sponsors better, because if everyone's got access to the email, everyone's answering the phone, I think it gets a lot more chaotic, and the more professional you can do it, the more likely sponsors are gonna respond to you. And another point coming off of that is, if they don't respond, perhaps there's someone from your network. So Guardian Displays has helped us with our pit display. We actually met them through one of our early sponsors, Rightshore. So just building your network. A couple of other pit display based companies didn't respond, but because we had that network and the link, they were much more likely to respond, and it actually worked. So I think just learning about your sponsors and your team is very, very beneficial.
And yeah, there's two very good points there, about networking, which you've mentioned a few times now. It has so many benefits. And not just during the competition. I think you'll find, when you leave the competition as well, you'll still have those contacts that you can reach out to, maybe if you want to do work experience or if you want to go for a job there someday, that's pretty helpful to have.
There's plenty of benefits, not direct, that you'll never be able to see.
Absolutely.
From just, knowing people.
Yeah. And yeah, another good point.
You learn how to email better as well.
Yes.
Sorry.
Absolutely. No, that's a great point. Yeah.
You develop so many core skills that you will take on to the future, especially with working with sponsors. I know we don't learn that in school.
No. There's so many things in this competition you just don't learn in school, and the traditional, system doesn't really teach you. And yeah, and the other point you made as well about, finding out each other's skill sets. So you really tried to kind of aim tasks towards the people who are strongest with those skills. And yeah, it sounds like, that approach of trying to dedicate the task of reaching out to sponsors just to a few people. Because otherwise, then it seems, and also a good point with doing that, is everything appears to be consistent if it's the same people who are doing it. Whereas if you have multiple people doing it, it does seem chaotic, like you said. So those are some really good tips there. All right. I think that's all been pretty good. I mean, does anyone else have anything to add or that they'd want to talk about?
Yeah, I think there was just one last thing, which I think Evie's going to find funny if I say. But I think having a plan of what you want to achieve in like a month, 2 months, 3 months, and going forwards throughout that time, I couldn't really stress enough how important that's been for us. Of course, I'm going to say that because I'm team principal of the team and oversee all the organisational and management sides. But having the status reports that's been emphasised in the project management guide for the World Finals. Something that's really helped us is at the end of maybe not necessarily don't have to do it every week. That is really helpful, obviously. Even if it's every fortnight, looking at what's gone well in those 2 weeks, what could you have done better, but also acknowledging what have you achieved in those 2 weeks, so you can you've got a bit of motivation to move forwards. But yeah, just drawing back on everything we've said, I think again just to emphasise that it's what do we want, how can we do that, and then what can we do to increase your chances of being able to do it. And I think that if you follow that 3-step kind of guide, I think you'll find success at one point down the line.
Side note off of what Javier just said, I think it's so important not to get stressed about project creep, because we all the time we're running over deadlines, and I know that the competition regulations weren't released as soon as a lot of teams wanted them. I know we were very ready to get our hands on it and start writing our portfolios. But just think about it, that time is so valuable for contacting your sponsors and building up. You can build up everything else other than writing your portfolios. And I think just changing it, plans will change. So Javier was saying about this weekly plan, they will change. You will lose sponsors, you will gain sponsors. Mm-hmm. But I think don't stress about it too much. They will come over time. At the start, we only had 1-2 sponsors. One of them was someone's relative. They will develop over time. And now we have a whole heap of sponsors that if we needed a pit display, we have someone to contact about that. If we needed aid on our presentation, we got someone to go for that. And if we don't have someone to go for it, we now have the ability to go say, oh, do you know so-and-so that can help us with this? So I think just keep working on it. Like we've mentioned previously, when you're starting out, it's so difficult to get these sponsors, but you will get them, and just keep trying, keep practicing, and you'll get better over time. You'll be able to contact them easier, and it just over time it will get better. So just trust the process. That's all I wanted to say.
No, I think that's a really good thing, and it's kind of boils down to iteration. Like with other aspects, like engineering, it's kind of iterating your process. Every time you reach out to a sponsor, you're kind of like, all right, that worked well and that didn't work well, so maybe we need to improve on that. So it's continuously improving with everything, not just with sponsorship, but it also goes for other areas. I think that's really key. And that's what the judges want to hear as well when you go to present to them. They want to see, not that you're completely perfect. They want to see that you have maybe failed, or you maybe have, you haven't done everything right. But then you can say to them, okay, we've identified that, and this is how we improved it during the project. And that's something judges really enjoy seeing. And as a judge, that's something I really enjoy seeing as well. So yeah, that's pretty
And it's
good.
not linear.
No.
It's not linear. It's like a roller coaster.
Absolutely.
You'll have bad weeks and good weeks.
Yeah. And yeah, if the past 2 years have taught us anything, it's to just be flexible. Not everything will always go your way, but that's the way the world is at the moment.
Oh, very last thing. If anyone did want to, I thought maybe we might shout it out, but if anyone does want to talk to us, we've always really been happy to speak to new teams. We love the competition. So in any way we can help anyone starting out, you can contact us through. All of the links are on our website, which is eclipse-gb.com. So just head over there if you want to get in touch.
That's amazing. Is that just for people in the UK, or is that open to anyone in the world?
No, worldwide, yeah. Anyone.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's very very generous of you. So Javier, do you want to just kind of wrap up what we've learnt today in today's episode?
Sure, that is absolutely fine. So I think the main points we wanted to stress, rounding everything in together, is don't give up. I think, as Evie said, it's really hard to start out, but if you trust the process and you learn from your mistakes, because they're always going to happen, you will get to that point where you've got enough people and your network's big enough that you've got somewhere to go. And as well as that, I think we also wanted to add on that it's really essential that you don't worry about writing your portfolios right from day one, building those things up and focusing on yourself, learning about each other, because that's going to help 100 times when you're coming to the end of your journey like we are. Is really important. So I don't know if Evie or Tom had anything else they want to add, but those are some points. That I wanted to conclude on.
Just practice makes perfect, and make sure you sell yourself the best you can to your sponsors, and just be yourself.
Right, awesome. So thank you for listening to today's episode of Off the Track.
Thank you.